Well, hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Um, so in the interest of preserving to the extent that we can the personal human component of this class, which I think is critically important for HMXP, I thought it might be useful to begin this week and continue through the end of the semester to post some brief video introductions to the text that we're reading. Now, most of the material that you will find in these introductions you can find on your own during your sort of 10 or 15 minutes of contextual work before each reading, and much of it will be repeated in the discussion boards, but it nonetheless seemed to me useful and valuable to attempt, again, under the circumstances, to reproduce something of the human component of a section of HMXP. So this week we're going to be reading two texts that are quite different. They belong to different sections of the course. The first text I'm going to ask you to read is one of the most important documents, one of the most important historical documents ever produced in the United States. And this is, of course, the U.S. Bill of Rights. I'm going to ask you to read the text in its entirety carefully, thinking about the context in which it was written, thinking about the purposes it was intended to serve. Then on the discussion board, I'm going to ask you to look particularly at the First Amendment to the U.S. Bill of Rights, perhaps the most important amendment, certainly the most controversial and vexed amendment. And I'm going to ask you to look particularly, drilling down even further, at the first two clauses of the U.S. Bill of Rights. So if you're familiar with the Bill of Rights, you will know that the first two clauses have to do with religion and the way in which the Constitution and the Bill of Rights intends or aims to protect the freedom of religious expression in the United States. Now, these two Bill of Rights these two amendments are, of course, rooted historically in the way in which the United States separated from Great Britain. As you are probably aware, in the 18th century, when the United States sort of comes into existence as a country, Great Britain had not only a king, which the founding fathers found totally intolerable, they also had an established church, an official church, the Church of England. That's still true today. One of the purposes of the opening two clauses of the First Amendment was to ensure two things. First of all, that the United States would never allow the development, the establishment of an official religion like the Church of England. This is sometimes called the Establishment Clause. The Establishment Clause. So Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. That is to say, no law allowing one particular expression of a religion to become the official state-sanctioned religion. The second clause has to do not so much with the establishment of a religion, but with the free exercise of religion. So the opening line of the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So free exercise of religion. If the first half of that sentence is sometimes called the Establishment Clause, the second half is sometimes called the Free Exercise Clause, and it's designed to ensure religious freedom, religious liberty in the United States. What I'm going to ask you to do is to think carefully about the meaning of those two clauses, and then I'm going to ask you to apply those two clauses to particular cases. I'm going to give you two cases, one to do with prayer in school and one to do with a law requiring that companies provide contraception to their employees. I'm going to ask you to think about whether or not these laws and practices constitute a violation of the First Amendment, either of the Establishment Clause or of the Free Exercise Clause. So that's the way that we're going to approach the First Amendment. For better or worse, the First Amendment, and indeed all of the amendments, are extremely rich and extremely vexed, so we can't talk about all of them. But I hope I've picked two that will resonate with you, and I hope I've been able to craft cases that will encourage you to think carefully about the implications of these amendments for the question of religious establishment and religious freedom in the United States. Cool? All right. So there's a brief introduction to the Bill of Rights and how we're going to approach it. The second reading we're going to be talking about is by a fellow named Matt Ridley. Matt Ridley, the reading is called Human Nature. And here we move into an entirely different section of the course. We're no longer talking about the self and its relationship to society. We're talking about the self and its relationship to nature. So as you will learn when you do a little contextual research about Matt Ridley is a British science writer with backgrounds in biology. In this particular text, as the title suggests, Matt Ridley is interested in the question of human nature. And you want to think carefully about what he means by human nature. What you'll find is that by human nature, Matt Ridley means something like what it is that all human beings share in common, the kind of bedrock foundational set of properties and characteristics that all humans, simply in virtue of being humans and belonging to the group Homo sapiens, what they share in common. Now, Ridley, as a biologist, and particularly an evolutionary biologist, is going to be interested in how it is that evolutionary history, that is to say, the formation of human beings through the evolutionary process, how that has impacted or affected human nature. You'll also learn that Ridley argues that in order to understand how evolution has affected human nature, we have to understand the primary mechanism of evolution, at least in human beings, and that is, of course, sexual reproduction. So Ridley's going to draw a really close link between human nature on the one hand, evolution on the other hand, and on yet a third hand, sexual reproduction. So you want to think about the connection between those as you're reading. What I'm going to ask you to do with this reading is three things. First, I'm going to ask you to get a sense of what Ridley's argument is. That is to say, what kind of link does he draw between those three elements: human nature, evolution, and sexual reproduction. So I want to get really clear about the nature of the argument that Ridley's making. Second, I'm going to ask you to give Ridley's text a sympathetic reading. That is to say, think about it from his perspective. Try to see the question from his side. What are some reasons to think that he's right? What are some reasons to think that his argument is in fact persuasive? And then, as we always do, I'm going to ask us to think less sympathetically and more critically. What are some reasons to be skeptical of Ridley's position? What are some reasons to think that it doesn't quite add up, that it has implications that we'll find intolerable and incapable of accepting? Okay? So there you have it, just a very brief introduction to the text that we're going to read for this week, and some sense of how it is that I'm going to ask you to approach those texts. Very well. I hope you're enjoying the class to the extent that you can. It's certainly an irregular situation, not the sort of thing I was prepared for, but I hope that we're nonetheless able to engage in some interesting discussions, and I'm following your discussion posts very carefully. I've been, in general, very impressed with your answers and the level of reflection and intelligence that they display. As always, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to let me know. I have almost literally nothing but time and availability at this point. So any questions at all, please feel free to let me know. Okay? That's all for now, and we will be in touch soon. Thanks.